1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
There is the smack of the leather.
Crack of the bat.
Crack of the bat. Smack of the leather. And it is time for Detroit City of Champions. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And that gentleman wrote a trilogy of books that I am just enamored with, astounded, amazed by the work that you put into these. And we were talking a little bit before we got on the air about, again, your process. And this isn't something to come up because I've asked you about, how do we get into this? And it was like it started with a paper in school and finding some information, and it was fascinating. But then when it came time, because it's not cheap to publish a book.
No, and the entire mainstream publishing industry is pulled out of Michigan.
Yeah,
you can't just go and say, hey, I want to go find Penguin Books or whatever.
Yeah.
You have pretty much the only way. There's Wayne State Press, which is that they
Sure.
publish a lot of more academic. You kind of have to be plugged in with Wayne State in some capacity.
Yeah.
Or you have to be kind of like a big national writer, like a Mitch Albom type. That to get a mainstream publisher. Otherwise, there's a major vacancy in Michigan. Regional publishing is almost it's tough.
But we kind of crossed paths with a conversation because I started talking about a newscaster in town who's all about baseball and playing cards. So, football cards, baseball cards.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're so in depth, and I know we've seen in your book. There's images of.
Oh, dude, I've got so many baseball cards. One of the things, a side note, I would try to do was tell. If you were to just look at only the baseball cards, this is a secret for the books.
Oh, wow.
If you didn't care anything about the books
Easter egg.
whatsoever,
Here we go.
It is an Easter egg. If you didn't want to read anything about anything about any of these players or any of the story or anything,
right?
And you started, especially from the second and third book on. You could probably have a really good understanding of everything I talk about from just looking at each baseball card and reading the caption.
Because you extract a ton of the information from that. And
I love baseball. I love baseball and sports cards so much.
Their cards.
Yeah, so literally, if there was a baseball card or anything for a player, I had it in there. I was trying to focus on the 1935, of course.
Sure.
And so, this is the Easter egg is that if you only read the caption of every baseball card you saw.
Are they indexed like that as a baseball card or no?
I don't have an index in the books,
okay,
but what I'm saying is if you started at page one.
Yeah, and just flip till you saw a card.
Exactly. Then you could pretty much get the gist of the books just by reading the captions of the baseball cards.
Right.
That's how much I love cards. I love baseball cards.
And here's a thing that I didn't know till today. I found this out today. This was new information. How did you fund? Because it's not cheap to self-produce a book and this trilogy of books that you did. How did you fund that?
Well, one of the ways.
What was one of the ways?
Well, there
was man-whoring. There was a lot of man-whoring. There's a lot of man-whoring going on.
Yeah, there's that.
There's a lot of
because I wouldn't take
tricks.
anything away from some of the. I had some great family and friends that helped me finance. I don't want to take away.
Okay.
This is actually a chance to give a shout out to them. I thanked them in the books, of course.
Yes.
But, there's a lot of people there, but my aunt.
You had a lot of benefactors that helped you.
My aunt
we didn't
Ginger,
talk about. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty about the money.
My aunt Ginger helped me out. My grandma Avison helped me out.
Nice.
My grandma Burgett helped me out.
Nice.
And then
holy crap! I love this. My heart is melting.
Oh yeah.
Keep going.
And then a really good friend of mine. One of my best friends. His name is Jeremy Gephardt. He went to bat for me with his parents.
Wow.
And his parents gave me a huge fantastic loan. Which I'm still actually working on repaying. And then my cousin Scott Bonner and his wife Jen, they gave me another massive amount. There's no way. We were talking about the baseball cards, how I sold these cards to help finance it.
And that was
that was maybe 1/15 of the money I needed to do this.
All right.
That was. So I don't even want to sit there and say I financed it all by selling my baseball cards. I sold everything I had.
You sold it.
And
there was this dog. I had a dog I really loved, and my little brother. He wasn't moving too fast, so that was gone.
Yeah. Oh, I sold everything I had, and I couldn't even begin to ask for loans from anybody or money from anybody. Until I couldn't look myself in the mirror without selling everything I had of value. Because if I had anything of value whatsoever and I went and asked people for, to help me finance these projects, You know what I mean? Like
And
that would
this
never.
is-
I couldn't even look myself in the mirror if I hey, I just borrowed a bunch of money from family and friends, but I still got my little nest egg of money for my own self. I mean, I cleaned out I had retirement money that I'd been saving up for years. That was gone. I mean, everything. I had nothing when I started
here's
this.
the thing. Well, here's the thing, and this is why when I met you and you were telling me the story and how passionate you are about these books and the story that they tell, is like you threw yourself into this spiritually,
Everything.
emotionally, time-wise, and financially into this.
Yeah.
And when someone meets you, and again, if it's just casually meeting you at an art fair, this is how I met you, just at an art fair. You're there, you had a little pop-up tent. You paid your $50 to be there to sell your books and your magnets.
Yeah.
And then we talked, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy is on fire about this topic. I go, I love his passion.
I sold a trilogy today to a lady, and
Nice.
I was into it today. I was working on the show, getting everything ready for the show today.
So-
lady came up and looked at the book, and I was like, she was like, "Oh, look at what's this?" And I was like, "Man, here we go. Here's a chance. I got to, like a little tune up my skills for tonight." And I jumped right into it. She's already like. What I get a lot of times is I'm still telling the story. Like I forget I'm even trying to sell a book.
Sure, after you get into it.
I'm all totally into it, and the lady's like, "Okay, I'll take one," and I'm like, hold on a second, don't worry about that.
There's more, but yeah, and
I'm like, don't worry about the sale. We'll take care of that.
But wait, there's
She's like,
more.
no, here's $100 for a trilogy. I'm like, no, hold on. We'll
here's
get to that.
150 if you stop talking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I get to the point where they're like, no, I'll give you more money to shut up and let me get my books. But that's what I'm saying. But that's why this show is so great because I get to talk about it. It's for an hour a week, dedicated, and we get to talk about it as much as we want.
But one of your passions, what's something that you really love, and they come through in the books. And I thought you might have cards. You don't really have. You only have a smattering of cards from 1935. You had a substantial collection from 1909, 1911, like early.
It's called
What's
it's
that
called
mean?
T206. It's a card collection that came out. Basically, what they were is
and we're talking about. Hang on,
cards.
we're talking about cigarette. We're talking about Joe Louis, and we're in the midst of Joe Louis, and we're going to get to the rest of the Joe Louis story, and we're talking about Max Baer today. So hang tight. We're talking about Max Baer and Joe Louis.
We'll get to
but
it.
before we get that, it's like how this book got funded was in part a small part, and yet one of your passions. And you relinquished that and sold it off.
It was sad. It was a tough day.
But so the cigarette cards, they're called what?
They're called T206s.
T206s.
Yeah, T206. And what they were, they're legendary, really, in the card collecting world. It's like if baseball cards are the stock market, then like T206s are like the gold of the stock market.
How many?
Like
so
gold.
is it?
Like
does
they're
that
the
span?
best.
Because you said 1909, 1911. How many years did the T206s span?
3 years, 1909 to 1911. So
Okay, fair play.
So 3 years these cards were coming out. It was the golden age of baseball. It was the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And like Ty Cobb has like 5 different cards in the set. There's just the most legendary cards in the set. But what they is that all there was like a company that printed the cards, right? And then there's all these different cigarette companies like across the country. And what they would do is that they would a cigarette company would say, "Hey, we need X amount of these cards for our cigarette packs."
Sure.
So like there was like Polar Bear cigarettes, and then there'd be like Piedmont cigarettes, and then Sweet Caporal cigarettes.
I almost want to smoke now.
Well, that was the idea. That was the idea, was that if you buy a pack of cigarettes,
don't smoke, kids.
You get a baseball card with it.
Yeah.
It was a giveaway.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that
They come with your vape
so they would
packs,
stamp so they would stamp the cigarette logo on the back of the card.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay,
there's no like player description or anything. It's just the front's got the picture and then the back's got the tobacco company.
Okay.
And so what they ended up doing is that some tobacco companies were smaller than others. Like Polar Bear was smaller than Sweet Caporal, and so there was less of that particular player with the Polar Bear back.
Okay.
And so it's a whole industry where each card is like
Polar Bear, being a smaller company, is more rare.
Yes.
Since they were a
so
little
you might
dog
have a
back then.
Yeah, so you might have a Ty Cobb. There's a red portrait and a green portrait for Ty Cobb, which is one of the most beautiful cards in all of baseball card history. It's just an amazing card.
Holy
but
crap.
There's a Ty Cobb red background, Ty Cobb green background. And then, but if one has Polar Bear and one has Sweet Caporal, then the Polar Bear is like 3 times more valuable.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
All right.
So that's what I mean. So there's so many variations, and so there's 550 cards in the set. And what kids used
I was going to ask how many cards were in that.
Yeah, it's like I think it's 525 or 550.
Okay, so you were up to like 50, 60
I had 50
cards.
of them.
Yeah, okay.
And what I was doing was for like 5 years, I worked on Mackinac Island, and And I did other odd jobs throughout the year. But what I was doing was
man whoring. Okay.
Yeah, and man whoring on the side, whatever. Yeah. But wherever I could save
whatever
up some
story
cash,
you want to write, Jamie, just go for it.
Yeah, wherever I could save up cash, whatever I could save up, $50 or whatever, then I would take that 50 and I would buy one card.
Nice.
And my goal was to get all 550.
Yeah.
Of course, the Honus Wagner. There's a card called the Honus Wagner T206.
Wow.
Most expensive card in all baseball card collecting. It's
Okay.
it's at one point there's one Wayne Gretzky was bought by. I'm sorry, one Honus Wagner card was bought by Wayne Gretzky.
Oh.
And it's actually called the Wayne Gretzky T206. That was sold at one point. It was $1 million. It was the first.
So
million,
Wayne sold it off at some
and
point.
then he sold it off. Yeah, the guy that owns it now is
So
Artie
it's
Moreno, the owner of the Angels. Owns
now that
card.
he owned it,
And it
it's
says
like
Wayne
even more
Gretzky.
valuable.
Yeah, exactly. So that card becomes even more because it's this famous Wayne Gretzky card.
Yeah.
And so
an Angels owner.
the owner of the Angels, Artie Moreno, owns that T206 Wagner.
And
now.
what's the approximate value?
I think he bought it for $3 million.
Jiminy crickets.
Yeah, but that was the first $1 million card. Yeah,
A piece of paper.
Yeah, So there's
A piece of paper from 1909.
Yeah. But it's like in really good condition. And
Yeah,
there's like
yeah,
a story
yeah.
behind it. This I think that's the
Yeah.
one that this kid found in like a tobacco tin in his backyard or something. Like that. Yeah.
Nice.
But anyway, so what I was doing was I knew at some point in my life I would have to acquire the Wagner in order to complete my collection.
Sure.
So I started a retirement account specifically that over the course of years I would accumulate enough money to buy this Wagner. It'd be like the final
madness.
card. So I'd have like friends over to my house.
My heart is melting.
Well, my dream was at one point I would have them all mounted on a wall. I'd have all 500 and whatever it is, 550. But I have like 549 cards on the wall with like one slot open for the Wagner. And then I would, my retirement account, I would buy that Wagner and put it up on the wall. And then like the next day I'd just sell it all off. You know what I mean? Because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
It's too expensive of a set to own. By the time that the set's completed, it's worth like $50 million or something.
My gosh, yeah.
So it's just.
But you had 50 of them.
I had 50 of them, and they were good condition too.
Yeah,
they were because they're all graded. They're in these cases that once they're in the case, you can't open the case without breaking it. So that's where they're graded, and they're like,
nice.
and so they were all really.
It's like 1900. I mean, this is 120 years old.
Yeah,
now.
I loved it. I loved them. I was just absolutely obsessed with them. Like just to give you an example, like how I was acquiring them, it was like my ex-girlfriend one time she wanted to go to the casino, and I didn't want to go, and she said, and she was like, "Well, I'll give you $50 if you go to the casino with me."
So $50 another card with that. Well, I'm not going to gamble
exactly.
it. Exactly.
She goes, "I'll give you $50 to go to the casino, and I'll basically buy you in when you go to the slots, right?"
Yeah.
And so instead of spending that money at the casino, I went to the casino with her, but I saved that 50 and then I bought a card. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of stuff I would do. Whenever I thought I was going to like buy something at the store, like groceries, I had like a whole list of stuff that I was going to get. And then I would like say, okay, I'm going to take off like these two items, and that saves $5 from this order, and then I'm going to take that $5 and set it aside for a card. And so that's how I did it. Yeah,
I love that.
So over the course of like 5 or 6 years, I doing that slow, methodical process, I had 50 of them.
So here's what I'm glad that this. I'm so glad this came up.
Yeah, it was kind of a random conversation.
We went deeper on this than we did when we were talking before. That we got to say thank you to some of the people that were behind.
Yeah, I haven't.
You had a lot of hard work. That was in notebooks, and I've seen your crazy Mad Lib notebooks.
Oh yeah,
and I love your notebooks and your binders and your information that you have that led to these books. And what brought you from those notebooks and those notes and those binders to this was apparently now some self-sacrifice and some very generous people that helped you along. I'm glad you were able to say thank you to anybody else that you need to say.
My
thank
parents,
you to.
my brother. There's the thank you at the end of my first book is just massive.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so
Let's
many
read
people
it.
I thank.
No, I'm kidding.
No,
I don't want to read it now.
Well, I actually say at the beginning of it because Homer, the Iliad by Homer is my favorite book, and they begin that book saying, even if I had 100 golden tongues and spoke from 100 golden mouths, I would not be able to sing the tales of of the story I'm about to tell you. Like it's a phenomenal opening for any
that
book.
was
and
kind
that's
of
how
your thank
so
you.
I actually said that in my my acknowledgments. I said even if I had 100 golden tongues and a whole 100, I say I take a line from my favorite poet when I say if I had 100 golden tongues and spoke from 100 golden mouths. Not what I would still not have enough words to thank all those people that helped me out with this. All right. So that's why it's tough. Is like because there's so many people that just friends and family over the years. Kind word here and there. That's valuable too. So.
Well, thank you to everybody who assisted back in the
Yeah.
creation of this. How many years has it been so far?
The book came out in 2008. The first book did. Yeah.
Everybody from 2008 and
even
then
before,
prior to that,
even before, yeah.
till now.
Yeah.
Thank you, and everybody who's been listening to the podcast, who's joined us and hung out.
But the point of that baseball
we appreciate you being here.
But what the point of the baseball card story, just to wrap that one up a little bow, is that I got to the point where to finance the book, one of the many different things was I had to sell off all the cards.
Yeah,
I sold 49 out of the 50, and
you kept the one. Which one did you keep?
The one I kept was he's a Detroit Tiger.
Okay,
his name is Donnie Bush. Yep,
Donnie Bush.
Yeah, he was the shortstop for the Tigers in 1909 when they went to the World Series.
1909.
Yeah, and so so I kept the Donnie Bush card. It's beautiful. It was the first card I ever bought, and it was the last one I was like, I'm not selling this card.
So what's that fellow worth right now? What's that?
It's probably like $130 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's just
That's cool.
It's got beautiful. It's sharp corners, beautiful. It's just an absolutely beautiful card. It's it's one of my favorite cards, if not my very favorite. Yeah. And I was like, I just can't sell. Like the morale value of just keeping this one card, because this is the seed of which I'm going to buy them all back. I kept pictures of all the ones I sold. I want to get them all back.
Yeah,
I sold off, and then of course the retirement account that I started to buy the Honus, that I cleaned that out too.
Yeah,
I cleaned it all out. I'm like, I was delivering donuts for my mom. She had a bakery at that point. I was keeping the quarter, like the 75 cents I got or whatever. I was like stockpiling the quarters. I
love that.
Thing,
I learned something new today.
Yeah. It's everything. I put everything into this. Yeah.
So, so we've been talking about Joe Louis. Here's something. Let's tie it in with Joe Louis and a trading card. Joe Louis has a trading card. Boxers don't have trading cards.
He's got a rookie. Yeah, he's got.
How does he have a rookie card? Boxers have cards.
Well, it's not just baseball cards. There was in the especially in the 30s and that they would have
I don't know
sports cards. They would have sports cards.
Sports ball. I know nothing.
Yeah, no.
We've established this. I know nothing about sports.
Well, yeah,
I'm just enamored with your story.
Well, we're going to talk about Max Baer today, and I'm just looking at it right now.
And there's
Max
Max's
Baer's
cards.
got a card.
Yeah, that's cool as hell.
Because there was sports stars of the day. They would have cards for all of them. I'm pretty sure.
And they would come through like
cards,
your Wonder Bread loafs that you're buying or cigarettes.
This one
Cracker
says,
Jacks.
They had bubble gum. This one says Sport Kings gum.
Okay. So it was a gum card. Okay.
Card, yeah. They were aware, they knew, when the T206 era, when they were doing those cigarettes, what the kids loved the cards so much.
Hey.
What the kids would do is that they would, they would buy a pack. They would save up enough money to buy one pack, and they would sell the cigarettes, loosely, for an extra. They would mark this, if a pack costs 20 cents or whatever.
Oh my God, I love
or
America.
10 cents or whatever, right? So they buy a pack for 10 cents, and they would sell each cigarette for 2 cents or something. They'd double their money, and then they'd go buy 2 more packs, and then they'd have 2 cards. I know.
And these are
totally.
10-year-olds doing this.
Yeah, exactly. So they would sell the cigarettes. It'd get enough money.
Holy crap!
To buy fantastic. back, to buy another card, another pack.
That is wonderful.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's great. There's all these stories with it and stuff. So here we are, 100 years later, dropping $100 on one card, and you can see and we don't. And they grew up. They were watching those players. They wanted the players because they were watching them on the field. We're buying them because they're just that's like a bygone age. It's the folklore. It's it's Americana. It's just quintessential form.
Yeah. So we really digress, but we were talking about the baseball cards before, and I want to bring it up again, and we went even deeper than I thought we would go, and I love it. But we've been talking about Joe Louis.
Yeah.
Right. And we were talking about he's deep. He's getting into his professional career now.
Yeah, we're working our way towards the last last couple episodes of Joe Louis here. I was thinking about what I wanted to cover for today because we're last we left, Joe had beaten Carnera, and then we were talking about how. August,
and nobody expected him to. Did they expect him to win?
Yeah, he was somewhat even money. Everybody knew that Joe Louis was a massive up-and-comer. Carnera was put there as a big test for him.
Oh, okay.
But if he
it was a test. It was decidedly
it was a big
test.
Yeah, Carnera was a former heavyweight champion.
It wasn't a walk in the park.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Carnera, there's every chance in the world that, this was Joe Louis' first really major fight.
Right, yeah.
In 1935. And so he beat Carnera, and then we talked about sort of the aftermath last episode where there was the summer of Joe, there's the summer of the Tigers, so that Joe is coming up at the same moment as Detroit's going Tiger Tiger Fever.
Yeah.
So it was really Tiger Mania and Joe Louis Mania at the same time in Detroit.
Yep.
And Joe's there. He's at the games. He's like, people are he's the center of attention at these Detroit Tiger games, and he's and he's a Tiger fan. He's a Detroit Tiger fan. So so it's like the summer of Joe, so to speak. This is Joe Mania. It's to have two. A lot of times you see like a mania, like people might remember like Fernando Valenzuela. There's like Fernando Mania, or there's these manias that go on for an athlete. Well, in Detroit, there was two manias at the same time. That's what's so amazing. Is You had the Joe Louis Mania, which was national, and then you had Tiger Mania, which is incredibly local. So but even though Joe Louis was national, but he was also incredibly local as well. So we had two manias happen at the same time at this moment. So that's where we kind of left off last week. And I was thinking about like we're sort of headed towards the next big fight with the final fight, really the big fight that Joe Louis had in 1930 at the end of this year, which was against Max Baer.
Right.
And I was thinking about like what do we want to cover today? Do we want to talk about Joe's sort of training and like whatever he did to get it ready for Max? And I started thinking about it, and one of the things I've always wanted to do was talk about Max Baer.
Because you said you're only as good as your competition.
You're only a lot of time when we talk about, that's why we've spent some time.
If you beat a bunch of AAA teams, what's the point?
Well, it's like, Joe faced this guy named Max, and nobody knows who Max is. Nobody knows who Max Baer is, so what does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, that's the same thing we've spent time talking about, when we talked about the Tigers, we talked about how good the Cardinals were, and the Cubs were. And we talked about the Lions, we talked about the Bears, what they had to overcome with the Bears. It's like to bring, you have to show how good the opponents were in order to really understand how good these teams were. In this case, I want to talk about today about Max Baer, but more specifically, not just as like to say, Max was a great fighter, that's why I want to talk about him. I want to talk about him because along the last 10 years of telling this story, whenever I talk about Joe faced Max, it's almost like a lot of times I almost get cut off by the person I'm talking to, because they're like, the Nazi. And like that, because that's a lot of the memory of the biggest memory of Joe Louis is Joe Louis against Max Schmeling, that Nazi fight, right? That didn't happen until 1938.
Wow,
that was 3 years after. This was years after this. So this is his first fight against Max Schmeling was 36. But what I'm saying though is that that's a totally different Max, right? That has nothing to do with this story. And whenever I correct somebody, go, no, this is Max Baer. They're like, oh, okay. Like they don't.
The Beverly Hillbilly guy.
Yeah, but that's the next center point of reference. This is Jethro Bodine from the Beverly Hillbillies, Max Baer Jr. This is his dad. And they still don't know. I mean, nobody. You know what I mean? Like Max Baer Sr.
There's no cred on his boxing prowess.
Like he's a forgotten person, really. Right. I mean, there's people that he's not completely forgotten, but
let's fix that.
That's what I want to do. I want to talk about Max, and there's also some rehabilitation of who he was that needs to be underdone because he was incredibly misrepresented in the movie Cinderella Man. It's a case that I take up in book number 2, and it's a case that I take up in the screenplay.
That's a big story, the Cinderella Man.
Cinderella Man is a $100 million Hollywood movie with Russell Crowe. There's a huge movie,
and then people
and they made him look like they made him look like the worst person on the face of the earth.
Their point of reference for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a mainstream movie, and then Max Baer is the jerk from Cinderella
And then people
Man.
kind of take that as a biopic.
Yeah,
and they're like, they don't. Well, maybe they took a little license with the screenplay to make it more dramatic.
A little license. They made him into a jerk.
Yeah.
And Max Baer Jr., Jethro Bodine, who I like, Beverly Hillbillies are one of my all-time favorite shows. I love Beverly Hillbillies. Like my mom, I've spent a considerable time. My mom pretends that the Beverly Hillbillies are a terrible show. You're like, oh, they're so stupid. I spent considerable time over the course of my entire life trying to make a case to my mom just about how an amazing of a show it is.
Oh my God, you're killing me.
Well, of all the, just as another side note, the 1960s shows, all these shows were fish out of water stories. Like I Dream of Jeannie.
Sure.
It was Jeannie that was like, she was from a lamp and from a different time, and then has to amalgamate in the world and she's got to adapt, right? And then Gilligan's Island. They're fish out of water too. They have to adapt to the island, right? They have to make coconut headphones and stuff, and ride a bamboo bike or something. They have to adapt to this situation. But the Hillbillies are the only 60s, 50s, fish out of water show where the fish didn't adapt to the water,
Right.
to the land. The land adapted to the fish.
Right.
So they were the fish out of water, but everybody adapted to them because they had the money. You know what I mean? So I love that show. If that's that component was fascinating to me. Of all those shows, it totally stood out. And so you see what I'm saying? And so I love that show for that reason. And Jethro Bodine, of course, one of my favorite characters.
Sure.
And so when I was
here's the thing I love about the show. It totally follows my train of thought, which is insane.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're all over the place, but it makes sense, and it makes sense to me. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Keep
good.
going.
No, I mean, we're
so,
just
but
fun.
so
We're
Max
having
Baer
fun, man.
Jr., Jeffrey Bodine.
That's his son of Max Baer, who's the
right,
subject
right.
of our show
So was he
today.
like going, hey, this movie was
He was
crap.
pissed.
Yeah.
He got crap. He
That's
was
my dad,
pissed.
man. What the hell?
Yeah, he's pissed off, and
Right.
that's what's so sad. I tried to write him on like Facebook saying I'm going to help rehabilitate your dad, but he never messages back. But I'm like, because I was disgusted too, because I love Max Baer Sr.
on facts.
I absolutely love Max Baer Sr. I love him as a boxer. I love him as a man. I love him as a personality. I thought he was amazing, and he's like. And like I say, Max, and when you read the articles where Max Baer Jr. is trying to rehabilitate his dad through like an interview with something, like they would, because there was all these, after the movie came out, they're interviewing Max Baer Jr. and they're saying, what do you think? And he's like, what do you mean, what do I think?
Crap.
He's like, it sucked, he's like, it made my dad look like a jerk.
Yeah.
And just to give an example of, well, I'll get to that point in a second of how bad it was, but he was like, they were like, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you good? You have like any kind of like a crusade planned or whatever? And he's like, what can I do?
Yeah.
He's like, this is $100 million mainstream blockbuster Hollywood movie. He's like, he goes, I'm the son of the guy of course, the son of the character who was made to look terrible is going to be upset about it. He goes, I already have 5 strikes against me before I can even try to make a protest.
Sure, yeah.
He's like, nobody remembers my dad. Nobody remembers any of it. He goes, basically, for the rest of time, my dad is going to be known as the jerk from Cinderella Man. And he's like, and there's literally nothing I can do about it except for like,
Right.
complain about it to, whatever random article wants to interview me today.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, that's all I can do. And so, reading this and seeing these different things, and I like Cinderella Man. I love the movie. I thought it was a great movie, but I didn't like the portrayal of Max Baer, and I've said from the beginning of this thing, really from 2008, 2009, that I want to try to do something to rehabilitate Max Baer Sr. And if this movie, the City of Champions movie comes out, when it comes out,
Right.
when it comes out, I wrote Max Baer in there, the character in there specifically to show who he really was and to show that the truth of who he was is far more interesting than the fake villain that they created for the Cinderella Man.
Let's go find Russell Crowe and kick his butt.
Well, I mean, yeah,
no, I'm not.
I mean,
no, he would crush. He would crush me.
We'll see. I'm not trying to threaten violence on the airwaves, and it wasn't probably his.
I am.
And it
I'm
wasn't,
in.
and it's not necessarily his fault. And the other thing though too is that and the other thing too is, and I'm not trying to hate on everybody
Yeah.
that was part of it because I
Sure.
understand. I understand the Hollywood concept. I understand
Yep.
how that they have to condense stuff. And they have to make things. They have to, for easy point. It's an hour and 45-minute movie, so they got to make a villain. An easy to digest villain. I get it, But that's where. But it starts to come into, to the way that I look at these movies is like, and why this with the City of Champions things. Why I haven't spent any more. I have not sent my screenplay out to Hollywood right now. I haven't sent this thing out there because I don't want to see my movie. It's not necessarily mine, but I don't want to see this City of Champions story get Hollywoodized, where they take good characters and good people and turn them into villains unnecessarily.
Right.
And that's what I mean. So that's why I could have taken like an easy route and just started sending copies all over Hollywood and looking for a buyer. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the harder route and keep the integrity of the story in place. That's the number one objective. Like money, yes, I would like the money. Yes, I would love the money. You know what I mean? I would love to have some money to be able to live off or whatever. But integrity is far more important. This story was like, I feel like I'm the custodian, like the caretaker of something that these people's voices, they were passed to us through a whisper, and now we're shouting them again. You see, but they can't fight for themselves anymore, and I'm not going to let it get turned into a crap film where they just use cheap tricks to turn good people into bad and use it for politics and all kinds of different agendas or whatever they want to do. It's not happening. And I own the copyright for the screenplay of the true story of how Detroit became known as the City of Champions, and I am not going to relinquish it until I have it in writing. That the character, at the very least, the character arcs will stay the same. The good people will not be turned into bad. That's the very baseline foundation of what I'm looking for retaining the integrity of the story. So with that being said, I want to introduce Max Baer and drive
So
into
how does Max tie into Joe's arc here in 35?
So Max was the final boss that Joe had to face in 1935.
Did he hold a championship at some point?
He was the heavyweight championship leading up into 35.
So Max had it.
He
at
was
that
the heavyweight.
time.
When Joe fought in Detroit in January, I think it was January 4th.
So he's our guy. We got to get him.
He's the final boss.
All right.
Yeah. And so January 4th, when Joe fought in Detroit, in the first few days of the year in 1935, we talked about the fight. In that we actually read right out of the screenplay for the people that remember that episode. We introduced that episode by reading off the screenplay. Well, the character who the way that I wrote that story is that Max was antagonizing the crowd in the screenplay. He was like the fans were like going, "Come on, Max, give us a fight." He was just horsing around, slapping Babe Hunt around. That was the guy he was fighting, because Max Baer fought in Detroit as the number one draw at Olympia Stadium. He was the heavyweight champion. He won the heavyweight championship in 1934. He was the heavyweight champion entering 1935. In 1935, Joe Louis fought as an undercard to Max Baer, who was the main draw at Olympia Stadium in January. And so Max Baer was there. And so this is the opening. This is the opening shot of episode 2, which is this crowd that's furious because Max is just horsing around and blowing kisses to the ladies and whatever.
Hey.
So Max would be akin to like a modern, they call him a foil in wrestling, where his goal was to elicit emotion from the crowd.
Right.
He didn't care if it was good or bad. He just loved that the crowd was riled up. That's all he cared about.
Love me, hate me.
Love me or hate me. It's all the same.
As long as you're buying a ticket again next week.
It's all the same. Exactly. and so that was who he was.
That's great.
And
that doesn't make him a villain.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. And so anyways, that was
That's
like
a Rowdy Randy Piper, one of my favorites.
Mine too. Yeah. So he was so that was the sort of role he took. And so anyways, I'm just going to run down a little of his biography.
All right, give me Max. Yeah.
So Max Baer, born in 1909 in Omaha, Nebraska. He had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. His younger brother Buddy would eventually fight Joe Louis. Oh. So Buddy Baer fought Joe Louis in 1941 and 42. Lost. Nice. I was going to say, guess what the results were?
Crushing.
Yeah, for the most part. 41 he put up a good fight. 42 he got knocked out pretty good. 1922. The Baer family moved from Nebraska to California. 1926, the family settled in Livermore, which kind of brings up the title of the show today, which is the Livermore Larupper, which was one of Max Baer's many nicknames. His father was a butcher, but not just like worked at a grocery store. His father actually leased a ranch called Twin Oaks in California in Livermore, where he raised, like it says, 2,000 hogs. So Max Max credits his physique, which he was an incredibly like chiseled, muscular physique, 6'2",
chasing hogs,
carrying carcasses. And splitting their heads open with axes and stuff.
Crikey.
Like
all right, I was like,
he's a beast.
I was chasing. You're splitting heads. All right.
No, he helped his father butcher hogs and carry carcasses.
Holy
crap,
that's
how he got big. Yep. And so So I've got a quote here. Since we were I've got quite a few quotes, so I'm gonna have to just kind of go over them. And but these are all in the book, so you're not. So anybody that wants to see them, I've got a great quote on how Maxie became, like how he first, because he was always a gentle soul. He never was wanting to fight really, and he was kind of his first real fight. He was baited into it because Livermore was like they call it a cowboy territory. There's all these open ranges with herds of cows and cowboys. I mean, this is still a cowboy era. And so there's like they're herding cows and that. And so one day he was bringing a girlfriend to a movie date to go watch a movie in town, and there's this cowboy that insulted the girl. And the girl was like, she's like, he said something, hey, whatever he said to her, it riled her up. And so she said, smack him one for me, Maxie, kick his butt. And there was this cowboy, this guy sitting out front, drinking a beer or something. And he's like, he ain't going to do nothing to me. I'm a big tough and tumble cowboy guy. And so Max is like, okay, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to mess with this guy. He's tough, he's a big guy. And she goes, if you don't sock him one for me, Maxie, then I'm not going to go to the movies with you. Something like that, right? And so he goes, okay, I'll go sock him.
Away.
And so he socked him and knocked the guy out in one punch. That's the legend, right? This is a quote that actually kind of like comes from Max telling the story to a newspaper guy. And he's like, it was at that moment, that there's always got to be the genesis story. He's like, it was at that moment I knew, like, if I could knock people out with one punch, I might have a future in boxing. And so that's kind of how we got into it. And so it evolved into, to summarize a little bit more of my notes here, into what Max's style, what it became was Max, Joe Louis, we talked so much about how Joe Louis, like, honed his craft, with Jack, evolved to Jack Blackbird, and Jack Blackbird's teaching him about, like, use your left, Joe, like, feel him out with your left and then hit him with the right, like, all this different stuff. Technique, as though Joe, to combine with Joe's overwhelming power, he blended it with such a scientific technique. Max was not that.
No.
Max was like, I'm going to take punches, I'm going to move in on you, and then when I get my chance, I'm going to land my Sunday punch. And that was that cowboy Sunday punch that he talked about.
Punch.
Because when he hits you with the right, it's out. You're not waking up till next Sunday. That was the idea.
That's the Sunday
that was
punch.
Max's Sunday punch. So that's the way it was he would take some shots. He would, he had a very basic, very rudimentary style as far as boxing goes. And he'd be a little bit more equated to a barroom brawler style of boxing. And he even had, I saw it referenced at some point or another, where he had like a backhand punch, even where like he would catch you off guard with a backhand punch, with the side of it, like almost like a slap with his glove.
Wow.
Which has no comparison in our day or theirs. Like, he was the only one I've ever seen that would slap somebody with the side with slap him with his glove. So that's like, and then he would laugh about it, and he would have a big joke about it, and everybody would be all mad about it, go, what are you doing, Max? You're getting, you just slap somebody with your glove. So that was the kind of stuff he would do.
Yeah.
And so he turned pro in 1928, right? But this is what's interesting. I'm sorry, 1929 he turned pro, but so the incident with that cowboy happened in 1928, and he's 19 years old. And in 1929 is when he turns pro. I'm sorry, the thing with the cowboy happens when he's 18. He's 19 years old, and the very next year, 1929, when he turns pro. So the incident with the cowboy happens in a very short time frame compared to when he turns pro. So there really might have been something to that whole cowboy incident where he punches this guy, knocks him out, and then he's like, hell, I'm good enough to go pro. I'm gonna start going pro. And so he fights against a guy named Chief Caribou.
Chief Caribou.
Yeah. So
there's nothing ethnically disparaging about that, right?
Yeah. So so as we were talking about back then,
we were talking about that earlier.
That was another thing we were talking about during the show is that if a Native American was
yeah.
often called Chief as a nickname, back then. So he wins his fight against Chief Caribou. He fights in 1929. He fought 16 times, all in California. He only had one loss, so his total fight record was 15-1 by the end of 1929.
Wow! And
he's 19 years old, so he's kind of like with Joe, where Joe fought a ton of fights, in his first year. And so in 1930, this is the second year. This is when stuff starts to get. This is when one of probably the most defining thing that happens to Joe, and this is where we're drifting into our Cinderella Man component. So August 25th, 1930. Max Baer, and he enters the fight with a record of 24-2, and the fight takes place at in a baseball field called the San Francisco Recreation Park.
Okay.
And so at this fight, Max Baer knocks out a man named Frankie Campbell, but he not only knocks him out, he kills him.
Oh.
He hits this guy so hard, he beats this guy so hard that Frankie Campbell, he never gets up off the mat. He's taken to the hospital and he dies in the hospital the very next week.
So do you think maybe that is part of where the Cinderella Man?
It's 100% because in the movie he brags about it. In the movie he's like, I'm gonna kill people, like he's like this, but in reality is it traumatized?
He was like, yeah,
it ruined his career.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's gotta set you for.
Yeah, it's so this. I mean, I have a bunch of quotes, right? I have a bunch of quotes, but we like I say, we ran a little bit over it with the baseball card stuff. So, but it's in the book. I have several quotes in the book.
Don't skip anything because we were ranting at the beginning.
Yeah, well, but I know we can get through it. But what I'm saying is, it's like,
we got all the time in the world, man.
I've got a short quote here that I can read. I got a short because
don't cheap them out, man.
Let's
swim around in this.
So he I did like a little quick screenshot in case I needed to summarize it because there's some longer ones.
Yeah.
Let me just see it. So
because I'm astounded how reality it just gets so bastardized.
Oh, big time. Here's the.
Go ahead, yep.
So this is a shortened one. This comes off of Wikipedia, even though I've got another link for it, people that want to follow it to see like a longer story of it. But this is the Wikipedia is good sometimes because I've read this and it basically lines up with everything that I've read about it on the for longer segments. But this is a little shorter bit. So Baer fought Frankie Campbell on August 25th, 1930 in San Francisco in a ring built over home plate at San Francisco's Recreation Park for the unofficial title of Pacific Coast Champion. Mm-hmm. In the second round, Campbell clipped Baer, and Baer slipped to the canvas. Campbell went toward his corner and waved to the crowd. He thought Baer was getting the count. Baer got up and flew at Campbell, landing a right to Campbell's turned head, which sent him to the canvas. After the round, Campbell said to his trainer, "Something feels like it snapped in my head," but went on to handily win rounds 3 and 4. As Baer rose for the 5th round, Tilly Kid Herman, Baer's former friend and trainer who had switched camps overnight and was now in Campbell's corner, savagely taunted and jeered Baer. In a rage and determined to end the bout with a knockout, Baer soon had Campbell against the ropes. As he hammered him with punch after punch, the ropes were the only thing holding Campbell up. By the time referee Toby Irwin stopped the fight, Campbell collapsed to the canvas. Baer's own seconds reportedly ministered to Campbell, and Baer stayed by his side until an ambulance arrived 30 minutes later.
So he stayed there with them.
Baer visited the stricken fighter's bedside, where he offered Frankie's wife, Ellie, the hand that hit her husband. She took the hand, and the two stood speechless for a moment. It was unfortunate. I'm awfully sorry, said Baer. It might have been you, mightn't it? She replied. Like it could have just very well been him if it wasn't her husband.
One more swing the other way.
And so at noon the next day, with a lit candle laced between his crossed fingers and his wife and mother beside him, Frankie Campbell was pronounced dead. Upon the surgeon's announcement of Campbell's death, Baer broke down and sobbed inconsolably. Brain specialist Dr. Tilton E. Tillman declared death had been caused by a succession of blows on the jaw and not by any struck in the rear of the head, and that Campbell's brain had been knocked completely loose from his skull by Baer's blows.
Jiminy crickets.
So
there's a picture. We got a picture of Frankie Campbell.
Yes, and also Ernie Schaff, a guy. Yes, we'll talk about him in a second.
So, but there's a picture, and Frankie's like he's like freaking supermodel swimsuit underwear looking.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are good looking guys, man. They're that is like Studley McStudville.
Yeah. Holy crap.
So anyway, the first thing the way we want to point out with this quote here is that we're talking about these circumstances. I read another story, which we're going to get to in a minute. It's a Sports Illustrated story from 1978 that I just absolutely love, and we'll get to it in a second. But that's a more in-depth look at it. And in this, they say this is the contrast from the Wikipedia and also from what I say. I actually tend to believe what this guy's Sports Illustrated story more. But what he says is that Max didn't know anything was wrong. In fact, the fight was over. Like, he didn't run up and just go, "Oh my God, Frankie, get up, Frankie." It wasn't like necessarily like that either.
He's like, "Hey, all right,
he thought the fight was over and all that, and it wasn't until he later on wanted to get a hold of him and that he was like, "There's something wrong." He never got up off the ring. And
so this said he was with him at.
So there's a couple different
20, 30
versions
minutes
of the story. There's
on the mat before the ambulance came, and then this other version says
there's other versions that say
the fact.
It was after the fact. But in either case, he was clearly in all the cases agree that he was there at the hospital when he died.
Right.
All the stories agree that his wife offering his wife and saying, "My God, it's awful." Yeah, and then there's another quote where Well, we'll get to this in a second.
Yeah.
But anyway, so following the death of Frankie Campbell, Baer is charged with manslaughter.
Oh.
And he is acquitted virtually almost immediately.
Sure,
it's almost
okay.
like it's like a process thing they had to go through. He was acquitted, but he was barred from fighting in California for a year.
Wow.
So there's this horrible thing that happens. So anyways, so that just to kind of warp speed ahead just a hair.
Okay.
A couple of years later, there's another incident where Ernie Schaff, there's a boxer named Ernie Schaff. We have a slide for.
Yeah.
Baer beat Ernie Schaff. And then Ernie Schaff, 6 months later, fought Primo Carnera and then died after the Primo Carnera fight.
Oh, shit.
But he was like saying, I don't feel well after the Baer fight. So he was having all kinds of problems after the Baer fight. And then he fought and then he died after the Primo fight. So some people are like, oh, well, Primo killed him.
Yeah.
And then they're like, no, Primo just finished off what Max started by his blows, right? Later on, after the fact, it turned out that he died of meningitis. So that had nothing to do with really either one of them. But because Baer had killed Frankie Campbell, they all lumped that on Baer. So they're saying like Baer is a man killer, right? Baer's a man killer. He's killing people in the ring. So this is now where we have to bring up the Cinderella Man, because in the movie, they talk about how. To drive the audience, to scare the audience, make the audience realize how tough Max
Turn him
Baer
into
is.
a villain. And
they say that he's killed 2 men in the ring, and then so here's James Braddock watching film on Max Baer's killing 2 people in the ring, and they're like, here's Max killing Ernie Schaff and Frankie Campbell. Like, look how he's dead before he hits the canvas. He's like watching film, and his wife's going, "You can't fight him, James Braddock. You can't fight him. He's gonna kill you. I'm gonna lose my husband." Like that's the drama for the thing. Sure. And then the worst bit is, and that's okay. That's understandable. You want to say, okay, this is the case. I don't have any really objections with that. The objection comes in, and one of the most really the most sickening scenes in the history of sports cinema, which is that James Braddock's wife is sitting at a dinner table, right? And Max Baer comes into the restaurant and says to her, after I kill your husband in the ring, you can come shack up with me.
Oh, Jiminy Crickets.
Which is one of the most despicable, it's designed purely to make you detest Max Baer. It's designed completely to say he is a villain and a horrible person, and we hate him.
Ugh.
That's the only, it's designed to create a villain who the protagonist of the movie is now vanquished, and everybody can feel a warm satisfaction at such a horrible person being bested in the ring. You see, that's what the entire component is. The reality is, as we saw from his outpouring of grief, that how tormented he was. Right, that's from just the very beginning. Well, I'm going to read another counterpoint, and this is from Max Baer Jr. But there's many other stories of this from people that knew Max Baer Sr. There's other stories of this that will speak to the exact same thing that Max Baer Jr. is saying in 2007 in a story called Mad Max, an interview with Max Baer Jr., which is talking about how angry he was about this, from the Los Angeles Times. Yeah. So this is Max Baer Jr. That's quoting this. Baer Sr. wept profusely at the hospital where Campbell died hours later. His son says, Max Baer Jr. says, and again at Campbell's funeral. He apologized to Campbell's widow. He also took part in a charity boxing match, donating all proceeds to Campbell's family. Nothing, however, could assuage his guilt. Years later, Baer Sr. would bolt awake at night, sweating and muttering, "You're okay. Please be okay." Baer Sr.'s recurring nightmare was always the same. His son says, a man lies prone on a canvas, and Baer Sr. tries in vain to revive him. I felt as if I never wanted to see a boxing glover enter a ring again, Baer Sr. recalled years later in an interview with Nat Fleischer, editor of the Ring magazine. My enthusiasm for the game had gone. What I wanted was to get away from California, go somewhere else, and try to forget. Does that sound like somebody that's going to be bragging in a restaurant and saying, I'm going to kill your husband and then I'm going to have sex with you or whatever? That's a horrific portrayal of somebody who was racked by guilt, and not only racked by the guilt of it, but it also, as we're going to see here, wrecked his career. Okay? Because over the next 4 of his next 6 fights, he lost 4 of his next 6 fights. Up until that point, up until that Frankie Campbell fight, he had a 24-3 record.
Yeah.
Right? He had 4 losses in his next 6 fights.
So
because the guy couldn't cope with the fact that he just killed a guy in the ring.
Right, yeah. And I mean, Joe was right on the cusp of that because Joe had a close call early in his career.
Yes, Jamie, he
and
did.
that could have been a turning point.
Absolutely.
Could have made or break.
Joe said if he doesn't get up, I'm never fighting again.
Right.
Because Joe wasn't a killer either. You know what I
Yes.
mean? There's the side. You know, Joe. Blackburn even said Joe's a manufactured killer. He's not a natural born killer. He had to, because Joe was a genuine nice guy, and so was Max. Max was a genuine nice guy too. As a quote we're going to read here in a second will show how nice of a guy he was. But in this case, he was tormented by what had happened in the ring.
I'm just looking at the young picture. You have young Max in here.
He's a beast.
Yeah,
I love that shot of him.
Yeah,
It's a fantastic shot.
Great shot.
Yeah. So anyway, so he lost. So now now after losing 4 of his next 6 fights, Max has got a 26-7 record, and so it's at this point really it's 1931.
Yep.
Max gets married. Jack Dempsey sort of enters. Jack Dempsey, the former heavyweight, the Manasseh Mauler, one of the great boxers of all time. Jack Dempsey, he enters the picture and he realizes how good Max is, and he starts to kind of offer a little bit of like a support structure for him, like to try to cope mentally. Like there's no real boxing psychologist going to help you get through how you just killed a guy in the ring.
Yeah.
How are you going to get through it? Like I'm going to go talk to this boxing psychologist that there is none. So he goes. So Jack Dempsey enters the picture and he sort of picks Max up and it's like, dude, this is your profession. This is what you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he tries to help him straighten some stuff out. And with that being the case, a combination of these factors, Max goes on and starts to sort of turn his career around. He wins his next 12 fights.
Oh. Okay.
He does go into the whole thing with Ernie Schaff. With where Ernie, he nobody directly blamed Max Baer for it. It came out that he had meningitis anyway, so it wasn't directly blamed for it, but there was loosely affiliated with that. And then so in 1933. He's making his way up the chain. There's Primo Carnera is the heavyweight champion in 1933 at this moment. Max Schmeling is sort of the next in line. We mentioned Max Schmeling, the Nazi, the idea. He was a German. He wasn't a Nazi. But Max Schmeling was a player in the world at this time in the world of boxing. And so Baer had to face Schmeling in order to get to Carnera. And this is another case in point to demonstrate why that Max was not a braggart of a man killer,
right,
as they portrayed in Cinderella Man. And so here's the quote right here.
Right.
So when he was fighting Schmeling, and so this is a quote. This comes from 1934, June 25th, 1934, from the Detroit Times by a writer named Don Gardner. So Schmeling went down, but he was up at the count of 8. He staggered dizzily toward the ropes. The now savage Baer bore down on him with a rat-tat-tat of blows. The one-time champion wobbled and grabbed the ropes. On came Baer, still flailing out his powerful punches. Then he turned to the referee, Arthur Donovan, crying out, "Mr. Donovan, please stop the fight. I don't want to kill him. I don't want to kill him."
Oh.
Then the right hand of Maxie Baer was raised again on high as a symbol of victory, and again he had begged a referee to stop a fight for fear of killing a man.
Oh.
So he's sitting there telling the ref to stop the fight for the guy he's supposed to be pummeling.
Call this.
Yes,
already.
there's numerous examples where he said, notice in the article where it says, again, he stopped the fight himself. How can you proceed as a boxer when that killer instinct edge it does not exist with you anymore?
Right.
It's gone at this, right? And so he's got, he's good at, but he's such an incredible talent. He's still rising up the chains of the boxing world despite having this this conflicting, psychological barrier. And so that's the Schmeling fight. His very next fight comes. Actually, it's a full year when he gets a chance. It's his next fight. He only fought 1 year. That he gets divorced in 1933, and that's when he really becomes Maxie the Playboy, the man about town. He starts to be in movies, and he starts
Maxie
to be
the Playboy.
Yeah, so he's doing all this. He's becoming more. He's becoming a celebrity personality.
All right, Madcap Max, right?
Yeah, exactly. We got a couple photos for that
too. Yeah.
So he's just becoming famous because of his smile, because he's he's doing movies. He's just a personality. He's a sportsman. And so in 1934, June 14th, he fights Primo Carnera and he TKOs him. He knocks Primo down 11 times. For the title, and Max has now got a 40-7 record And so and now he's the heavyweight champion of the world.
He's almost like Bucko.
Yeah,
eating them steaks and being whimsical, but getting on the ice and being the dude.
Totally. If I, in fact, probably
whatever I could,
you're sure.
Whenever I could invoke Bucko.
Well, and you're not wrong.
We'll
in fact, Bucko was probably the nearest comparison. Max was a fun-loving guy. He was this, he was like he loved to play the foil. He loved to do it. He was an actor. He was an entertainer. And so we talked about early 1935 where he fights in Olympia Stadium. He's the main draw. And where Joe Louis is the underdraw. Like, he doesn't fight Joe. He fights, but Joe is like on an undercard. And Max is the main draw. And he basically just screwing around during the whole fight. Everybody's all mad at him. He doesn't knock out Babe Hunt. He doesn't do anything. He's just, driving the crowd insane.
Yeah.
And so, and then we also mentioned how Joe is, he's about to fight Primo Carnera himself. And he's got to fight Primo in order to get a chance at in order to get at Max Baer's title. Unfortunately, we talked about how in the Cinderella Man fight, which is what we're talking about here too.
Yeah.
June 13th, 1935, as Joe is preparing for his fight against Carnera on June 25th, he's at the fight and watches James Braddock get beat by watches James Braddock beat Max Baer. So Max Baer loses his title. Joe Louis thinks that if Joe is training for Primo with an eye on Max Baer, fighting Max Baer for the title a couple months later, but now Baer loses the title to James Braddock. And so now he doesn't have the belt.
There's a whole other hierarchy of
so now everything switches.
Yeah.
So now he's still got to fight Max Baer, but now he's got to fight Max without the title.
Yeah.
And so so now so now so actually right at this moment, right around this time, that quote I read, out of the just a little bit ago.
Yeah.
That this is an interesting thing. In February, it mentioned the exhibition fight that Max fought for, to raise money for the widow of Frankie Campbell, right?
Yes.
Well, check this out. February 15th, 1935, okay? Max Baer, he fought that exhibition for that widow while he was the heavyweight champ.
Oh.
Okay?
Yeah.
So as the heavyweight champion, he fought Stanley Pareda, who's a ranked fighter. He's come up in our story with Joe. Stanley Pareda, Max Baer fights an exhibition against Stanley Pareda as the heavyweight champion of the world. And that was the money he gave to the widow.
Oh, okay.
As the heavyweight championship draws are big gates.
Right.
He gave that money to his widow, and they set up, and with the money from that, they set up a trust fund for Frankie Campbell's wife and his kids in that from the fight that he fought against Stanley Pareda.
Because Joe was getting like 50,000, 60,000 for winning these undercard, almost undercard fights.
Yeah, undercard fights, and this is the heavyweight champion fighting these. He donates all the money from this fight just to start a trust for the widow of Frankie Campbell. Does this sound like a guy who was bragging about killing a guy?
No.
On his way up. So if the movie would have you believe that this is the case, right?
Yeah.
He fights an exhibition on February of 1935 in which he's given all the money from the exhibition to Frankie Campbell's widow, right?
Yeah.
And starting a trust fund for her. And then a month later, as he's preparing for James Braddock, he's going to a restaurant and telling that he's going to kill James Braddock and sleep with the guy's wife.
Yeah.
Because he's killed so many people in the past. Does that sound like a natural flow of events to you?
Different.
Mine either.
Different dude.
Yeah, a totally different guy.
Yeah.
And so as I'm saying, there's so many examples of the fallacy of that component.
You get these biopics, and people take them people take all that stuff as fact.
But the worst thing is about these biopics or biopics, whatever you want to call it. The worst thing is
the ancillary, the side people, the ancillary, not really ancillary, but the side people.
Yeah, but they market the story as a true story.
Right, and it's not.
And the thing is about is, well, the majority of it's true. You got a lot of factual stuff in there that James Braddock won the heavyweight championship. A cursory look.
It happened on Earth. It was
cursory look. Whenever I watch a history movie,
it happened on this planet.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's true. That's what I'm saying. I thought it was actually a really great movie. I actually enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is that
then when you start doing this research, you're like, holy crap.
The casualty of the movie is Max Baer,
right.
who is like nobody, like who is out there besides his own son, of course,
saying,
who's gonna
hey,
believe his son? My dad
crap.
wasn't a bad guy. Like,
right.
of course, the son of the guy's gonna say that. But you know what I mean? But like I say, once the movie,
and now you, Charles.
Well, that's
Thank
now
you.
us, hopefully, Jamie, and hopefully anybody listening to the show. You know, and hopefully when we put our movie out and we show Max who he really was,
nice.
You're going to see the real Max Baer. I mean, this is one of the signature hopes of this movie,
right?
Is the rehabilitation of Max Baer, of who he really was. And I'm telling you, if we achieve that goal with this
he's
movie,
not even a Detroit guy.
No, he's not. But right is right, fair is fair.
All right.
And I'm not, like I say, I'm not.
I'm
mad as hell, and I ain't gonna take it anymore. Right. It is. So, anyways, how much longer we got this show?
I don't know.
What time? How long have we been doing the show?
It's about 55 minutes, I think. We've been
we're done. It's about right. I got a little time for one more. This is the quote I really wanted to get to.
All right,
really.
yeah. Dude,
and so there's
a podcast. We could go as long as we want.
That's true.
It's my mom's still listening.
Okay, great.
Thanks
my mom
for hanging
too,
on,
hopefully.
Mom.
Yeah.
It's she might have listened in two parts. She might have paused and come back, but she's listened all the way through.
So there's this great article. It's I think it's just a phenomenal job. The guy, but it was a Sports Illustrated article. It came out in 1978.
All right.
And it's a very easy search. I mean, it's a really easy search to find it. It's a Sports Illustrated article called "Send in the Clown."
Oh.
And it's and the sort of subtitle is Max Baer could bust them up with a right hand and then break them up with laughter. But his career was overshadowed by tragedy. So you'll find it by just looking up "Send in the Clown." Anybody that wants to read a great story, not Wikipedia, I have to go buy some obscure book on Max Baer, not sure what to read. This guy, he comes across as though he knew Max Baer, because he certainly has a hell of a lot of quotes from people that did. And so he had some kind of inside. I mean, this guy spent a lot of time. This takes some time to read. This isn't just some couple-page article about a guy that's he's just kind of trying to fill some space.
Okay.
This
was in depth.
This is a majorly in-depth article, and it's one of these articles that the entire magazine may have been devoted to this one particular thing, because it's a tremendous article.
Edition,
it takes a little time to read, but it is a very well-written article on Max Baer.
And helps clear up some of these fallacies.
Absolutely,
right,
absolutely. Good. It's a phenomenon. He doesn't even know about the movie Cinderella Man at this point. He's just writing an article about Max Baer.
Okay.
Just trying to say about how he was sort of like nobody really, just a guy that's worth remembering.
Right.
And so there's no way we can read this entire thing. So really, I just wanted to read the intro and then hopefully pique your interest enough to go and read on more.
What's that lead? That lead?
So again, the head of the article, it's a Sports Illustrated archives article. But you can find it very simply by Googling "Send in the Clown" and then Max Baer.
Okay.
Or "Send in the Clown," and then the author of the article, his name is Ron Fimwright. The last name is Ron, R-O-N, and then the last name is spelled F-I-M-R-I-T-E. It was published in March 20th of 1978. Absolutely worth the read if you have a chance to read it.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to read it right off the first few paragraphs of it. So he had few qualifications for his job. He did not emerge snarling with resentment from a ghetto, nor was his childhood lost in the bowels of some small coal mine or steel mill. He was predominantly German on his father's side of the family, Scotch-Irish on his mother's, but no ethnic fires flamed in his far from savage breast. Although in the latter stages of his boxing career he wore the Star of David on his trunks, he was only a quarter Jewish by virtue of a paternal grandfather. He was reared on farms by parents so loving that the children kissed them goodbye before journeys no more venturesome than to the town pharmacy. He was such a timid youngster that he refused to fight when challenged by his schoolmates, sending forth his older sister as surrogate belligerent. By his own recollection, he did not hit another person until he was in his late teens, and then not in anger but in self-defense. Boy and man, he sought only to amuse. He seems, like Sabatini's Scaramouche, to have been born with the gift of laughter in the sense that the world was mad. But above all else, he was a lover, not a fighter. That such a man should have become heavyweight champion of the world and a principal in some of the ring's bloodiest conflicts, including one, purportedly two, that brought about the death of an opponent, is one of the most remarkable paradoxes in the history of sport. In all probability, there never has been a fighter so contradictory in nature as Max Baer, and this is written with full knowledge that Muhammad Ali is equal parts jester and assassin. 40 years before Ali occupied center stage, Max Baer was entertaining and confounding ringsiders with routines that seemed more appropriate to musical comedy than to the squared circle. Unlike Ali, Baer was invariably the butt of his own japery, and if he was not the fighter Ali was, he could, as they say, sure bust you up with a right hand. Fighting at a time when only the most pedestrian of journalists addressed pugilists by their given names, Baer accumulated more nicknames than any fighter before or since. It is a tribute to his infinite variety that he was the Livermore Larupper, the Livermore Butcher Boy, Madcap Maxey, the Larupping Lothario of pugilism, the pugilistic poser, the clouding clown, the playboy of pugilism, and the fistic harlequin. He provided lively newspaper copy, for he was the most quotable of boxers, in all likelihood the most quotable of athletes. When ex-champion Jack Dempsey, working in Baer's corner during his fight with Joe Louis, advised him not to worry because he hasn't hit you yet, kid, Baer turned dolefully to Dempsey and through bloodied lips replied that you better keep an eye on Arthur Donovan, the referee, because somebody in there is beating the hell out of me. Still, as many fans and newsmen as Baer delighted, he antagonized an equal number. For those who took seriously this most serious of all sports, Baer was outrageous. He had a magnificent 6 foot 2.5 inch, 210-pound physique with airplane width shoulders, a broad chest, a 32-inch waist, and long, smoothly muscled arms. He could take a punch as well as any heavyweight, and there are those who say he hit harder with a right hand than anyone who ever fought. When it was fashionable among fight people and to sculpt in imagination the composite boxer, Lewis's jab, Dempsey's left hook, etc., the right hand was invariably Baer's. He seemed to do his road work on nightly dance floors, and his sparring was mostly verbal. His training camps in boxing tradition, hideaways as free of merriment as Montserrat, were like Borscht Circuit resorts, with Max as social chairman. Against the fiercest opponents, he often fought indifferently and with the detachment of one reviewing a performance instead of performing. Did the people enjoy it? He would inquire after the battle. In 1935, Baer lost his championship to the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock, a 10-1 underdog in one of the biggest upsets in ring history. He clowned through much of this desultory bout, grimacing in imitation of the movie Tough Guy, hitching up his pants, chatting amiably with ringside spectators. After one glancing Braddock blow, he performed a rubber leg dance that Chaplin might have envied. All the while, the plodding, desperate challenger, fresh off the relief rolls, was collecting the points that would win him boxing's richest prize. Oh. As if the comedy in the ring were not enough, Baer could josh about the defeat afterward, complaining that he had been literally handicapped. He had injured his right hand in training, he quipped. My punches hurt me more than they did Braddock. But then this is the final couple paragraphs here. Yeah. But there were occasions when Baer looked as if no man alive could survive in the ring with him. Max Schmeling was among the finest of heavyweights, an ex-champion, later as the first conqueror of Joe Louis. On June 8, 1933, in the searing heat of Yankee Stadium, Baer knocked out Schmeling in the 10th round of a fight that earned the winner a chance of the title. Schmeling went down in the final round with a picture-perfect right that left him squirming on the canvas. He regained his feet, but the fight was quickly stopped. Baer won the championship easily, knocking down Primo Carnera 11 times in 11 rounds before the fight was halted. Even with so much on the line, he remained Madcap Maxey, remarking to the champion after he had been dragged down by him after an exchange, "Last one up is a sissy." Max hated fighting, says Mary Ellen Baer, his widow. How he ever hit anybody, I'll never know. He wouldn't even strike his own children. All he wanted to do was entertain people. I can't imagine a person as soft as he was becoming champion of the world. He was so kind. He had no mean streak at all. He was one lovable bastard, said Tom Gallery, who promoted some of Baer's fights in the Los Angeles Olympic in the early 1930s. He's the last person you'd ever expect to be a fighter. Why, he'd be clowning around 10 minutes before a fight. But oh, what he could have been.
Wow.
So I just love that introduction is phenomenal. The entire article is absolutely worth reading. It's worth the time. But that last line is really the kicker, where he says, "But oh, what a fighter he could have become."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, it's like because the rest of they spent a lot of time talking about the effects of that Frankie Campbell death.
Sure.
And so in Baer, what you find is, and we're trying to kind of build up to like his fight against Joe Louis. He lost this fight. Clearly in that intro, how he talks about how he's guys clowning around in his championship fight against James Braddock is this hungry tiger who's just spent 30. He's like doesn't have enough money to buy milk for his kids. The guy's like fighting with the tenacity of a caged bear or a cornered tiger or something. I mean, the guy's fighting with every juice he's got left, and Baer's screwing around, blowing kisses to girls in the crowd. So I mean, it's like it's so. So that's what they're saying though is there was a despite I mean what they get at repeatedly is what if he had not killed Frankie Campbell?
Sure.
What if that fighting would have been his obsession and he had not had this hesitancy of becoming this?
We may not have had Joe.
We might not have had Joe. Exactly. Like,
Joe had a nice career to this point.
But look what Joe eventually became.
Right.
Imagine if that Frankie Campbell's moment for Joe had happened.
Sure.
And Joe would have been tentative for the rest of his life. We might not have even heard of him.
Right.
But but what if Max was what if Max was cut out to be on a level that's like the next Jack Dempsey or the next Joe Louis, whatever. I mean, he was still huge. He was massive. He was a heavyweight champ, and he was one of the best fighters of his era. And he did it while screwing around in the ring and not even, like when he's talking about training, he's like, he's like screwing around. He's going to the bars and he's taking training lightly and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, and he said, like, but what he could have become.
Right.
He could have become like the best fighter ever. But in his moments where he was focused, where he was concentrating all this, he's one of the best of all time.
Sure.
He's listed right here. When they talk about rankings, Max Baer is ranked number 20 this is by Ring Magazine that came out in 1998. So maybe it's changed since then. But as of 1998, he was ranked number 20 of the 50 greatest heavyweights in boxing history.
Yeah.
Right. In same Ring Magazine, 1998. He was ranked number 22 of the top 100 hardest punchers of all time. And actually, this is that's 1998. So actually no, I'm sorry, that one, the hardest punches of all time, that was 2003.
Okay.
So as of 2003, he's ranked number 22 of the hardest 100 hardest punches of all time. Ooh. And it's because of that right-handed Sunday punch, because he caught you with this. I'm saying, like, he catch you with that Sunday punch,
sure,
he's knocking you literally into next week, and that's what. So this is what Joe is gearing up for. That's kind of we want to talk about the redemption of Max, and we want to talk about this, this about that element. But I also want to kind of end off talking about how this is a guy that Joe is facing who is a paradox,
right,
where Primo is like this giant of a man, and he's trying to do what he's trying to win, and of course all this stuff. Max is a paradox, and Joe didn't know what he was going to get out of Max in this case. He's got, on one side, he can get, the boxing Harlequin, the madcap Maxie, where he's screwing around and joking around and stuff and taking it lightly like he did against James Braddock. On the other side, he could catch one of Max Baer's rights, a guy who's just a natural born talent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That natural talent might show up this night, and Max might be focused, and that overhand right catch Joe off guard and send Joe Louis into next Sunday.
You got to be ready for both.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what Joe's facing. And this, the fight that's going to eventually come, we're going to talk about the leading up to it. There's a lot of stuff that leads up to it in the next episode. But that's what's Max Baer Sr. is an absolutely fascinating character. And again, I once again, the article that I really advise you to read if you have a chance, if you really want to dive a little bit more into Max Baer, tremendous article, Send in the Clown, a Sports Illustrated article written in 1978. Really worth the read. And and it dives into, this is a guy who lived an incredibly
in the book,
colorful life.
Yeah, I mean, you were only able to skim across this in the book. I did a
special section on Max in the book. There's see these blue pages here?
Oh, you got 3 pages on Max?
So anytime
you do have a good chunk.
Yeah, so whenever you see these gray pages, these are all special sections.
Right.
So there's a 3-page
It takes you away
special
from
section.
1935 in the Detroit.
It's all
30
a
little bit.
Well, it's all. This is. I mean, it's right in the place where Joe's about to face Max. In the main section of the book.
What sets the stage for that, for the Detroit aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, this the Detroit aspect. Like, well, I'm going to put this picture in the next one. Like, there's Joe, and he's in training for Max Baer, and Mickey. He's sitting there, trading fake punches with Mickey Cochran. There's a photo. This is taken a week before the fight.
Wow.
There's a viewer can't see it. We'll show it in the next video. I don't have that picture for you there, but
we'll get it.
But it's got Joe in a suit, at a Yankee game. He's in New York getting ready for Max Baer, and the Tigers are in New York to play the Yankees, and Joe's like trading these little shadow punches with Mickey, and it's like, this, all this stuff comes together. And, and the story of Max Baer is another fiber in this tapestry.
Right.
This just incredibly, this incredible tapestry of this story that is just unlike any sports story ever told. And like Max Baer, when I'm telling the story to people at art shows and stuff like this, you're like, hey, Max such and such. They're like, oh, Max Schmeling. Like, no, Max Baer, the other Max. The guy that knocked Schmeling out, earlier on, a couple years before that. And so it's like, I just, I'm just grateful to be able to do this show and to take an episode and talk about a guy like Max Baer, who I just have the greatest respect for, and and I wrote him into the screenplay like that, and I like I say, it is one of the highest goals of the screenplay and of these books to rehabilitate in the public image, the public perception of who Max Baer Sr. really was.
I like it.
And so, maybe hopefully we've taken a step in that direction tonight. So
cool. All right, so thanks everybody for being with us. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, collect, I don't know, whatever it is, wherever you are, wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Hit that thumbs up. Click.
That's
There's
it.
like little image we bring up on the screen where it's like they show the little thumb clicking the button.
Yep, ring the bell, all that stuff.
Click
man.
the thumb, hit the subscribe.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for and thanks to everybody who has contributed and supported you to this point.
Yeah,
we mentioned that earlier. And a few new aspects.
I still owe some people some money, but they know the money's coming. I'm good for it, man.
We're working on it.
To their credit, none of them have ever harassed me over any of the money. I still owe people. I'm still paying them back in small little nuggets whenever I get a chance. We've never this whole project. This is there's never been any money that like real I've never had any. All the backers have been family and friends and people and like this, and all the only reason I'm even in business today is because this story resonates with people. Like the lady I talked to in the store today in the mall. I was working at 12 Oaks today, and the lady just loves the story. She thinks her husband's going to get a kick out of it. I've literally gone from book sale to book sale to book sale.
I said, we met
12 years.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a little over a year.
Yeah.
I met you like a good 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you left an impression with me about this story, about how passionate you were about this story. I was like, I got to talk to this guy again. I wonder if he's still out there.
It was great. It was really cool when you messaged me. I've met a lot of people along the way, Jamie, honestly, that have said, like, let's do this, let's do that. I love this story. And it's always been BS, dude. It's always been BS. We head down a path and nothing ever comes of it.
Here we are in the padded walls.
But I've always give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I always try. I always roll with them for a minute, and see what happens, and then nothing ever comes out of it. But with you, it's been fantastic. It's been great. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yep, and we're here. I love every time we get to hang out in the padded walls.
I love it. Yeah,
with
we
our
some
shirts
drinks,
with the long sleeves on it. We're good,
out.
man.
Yeah, no, it's been great. That's what I mean. Like, I just love telling the story. I love being able to actually focus on. Dive into some depth on stuff like the Max Baer and stuff, and I'm just absolutely thrilled that you love it too, because I think once you get bit by the bug of this City of Champions story, it's just it's just a fascinating story. I mean, it's not like the interesting thing is one of the many things is that nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it. Right?
No.
So it's like you're hearing it right now. This is the only place you're getting any of this information.
Yeah.
This is not like it's like we're just like talking about some story that 1,000 other people have rehearsed and regurgitated, and we're just kind of taking a different slant. This is the only place outside of these books that you're going to hear about any of this stuff. And so we're bringing the greatest sports story. Like I say, I always talk about this is the greatest season of all time. I make a case for it with all these books. But I think this is the greatest sports story ever told. I mean, how can it be any better?
I can't.
And so this is the only place you're going to hear it from. And so I thank the viewer. I thank everybody who's that's interested. I thank every single person who's ever bought a book and allowed me to go from. I mean, I've had weekends where I was driving to an art show in like Kalamazoo, right? And I had to stop at an art show that was a 2-hour show in the middle of the state. And if I didn't sell a book, well, I didn't have enough gas to get all the way to the other side of the state.
Oh.
Like, that's how it's been. Like, for literally from the last 11, I'm not even trying to, it's not even being dramatic.
Yeah.
This is how it's been for 12 years, is literally like book to book to book, sales, like just trying to, take, get through another week and another week and another week, and it's like, but I just feel like this is, you say like, oh, you got a lot of excitement or whatever. And it's like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm all in, man. I'm all in. I sold my baseball cards. I cleaned out my retirement a long time ago. I cleaned out my retirement account. I don't even remember what anything about it really. It was so long ago. And it's like, I'm all in. So I mean, it's like, if you can't get excited about something you're all in with, like, what can you get excited about?
Well, I'm in, and I'll be back in again next time, and we'll be back when Joe and Max face each other, right, next time, right?
Well, remember, we're going to leave off with them. We're not going to talk about the main event.
That's the main event. Oh, that's the main event.
That's the main event of Joe's year. He's the final boss.
Okay, so we got a little bit to lead.
We're
going
to lead all the way up to the day of the fight, and leave the viewer listening waiting more, because I want to have all the final bosses of all the different teams.
Sure. We didn't do the final game of the series.
Tigers, Lions, or Red Wings. We didn't do it off any of them.
All right.
We left off with the Red Wings where they just gave up with the rabbit's foot on the back of the goal, where they had the miracle comeback, 4 goals in 2 minutes. And so we left off there. So there are all these. That's how I wrote the screenplay, was the final episode. You get to see all of them and thing, because if there's too much time that spans between, like if we would have already talked about the Tigers' last game in the World Series, that was like a year ago.
My God, yeah.
So it doesn't have the same impact for
because they all happened.
They all happened in
rapid fire.
Rapid fire. The Tigers won in early October. The Lions won in mid-December, and then the Red Wings won in early April, and Joe was in late September. So so I say like this: so the chronology is the late September for Joe. It was the 25th of September, I believe. October 6th for the Tigers. So that's like a couple weeks apart from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, literally 8 days apart. And then the Lions are December 15th. So that's only a couple months after this. And then the Red Wings. We're in late March, early. They clinched in very early April. So this all happens within a 7-month stretch of time.
Right.
7-month stretch of time. So that's what I mean. It's like rapid fire, and then all this other stuff we're going to be talking about with all these other champions, and all these other athletes. That's all interspersed throughout all of it. You know. So. I mean, it's that, but I wanted to keep it all together, especially in the movies and in the story with this too. And I'm not sure exactly when we're going to get to that. Maybe we'll do it for Champions Day for 2022.
Ooh, I like it.
Maybe we'll do something like that. It might be kind of like an event. Like especially if we do an event at the Historical Museum. Yeah. Maybe it'd be cool to to go rapid fire with if there's anybody that wants to join us for a party down there or something. We'll give a little brief intro, but then go rapid fire into the events.
I like it.
And record it. That'd be kind of cool.
All right. That's it. Till next time, thanks for being with us. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.
Put them up.
Put them up.
Put them up.
I forgot that, yeah.